So I wanted to do something different for the channel. You see, when I had ideas or illusions about entering public life way back in the day, wow, does that really count for anything on such a small scale? But anyways, I I deeply resented, even though I had watched, as people know, YouTube for many years. I deeply resented the like label of a YouTuber and whatnot. I always thought that YouTubers were cringe, and I'm going to be a high-minded blogger. But now, of course, I kick myself in the pants for not pursuing YouTube quicker. Uh, what I want to do is an old school like reaction video, debunking response video, I guess you could call. Like we're gonna go all the way back to the heyday, the halcyon days of 2016 YouTube, and I will try not to get as apoplectic. Well, what am I talking about? The response video was there since the beginning. I mean, the you know, the YouTube atheists versus the YouTube Christians. Back when YouTube had that feature where you could respond to someone's video. Can you imagine if that existed nowadays? I mean, how many people would clout chase? More overtly. So this person, Adam something, is one of those like newer BreadTubers that is really like getting by on basic content. And I really I know that I shouldn't do this. I know that deep down I shouldn't lower myself to this. But there's something about this video, why academia is left leaning, that is so painfully liberal. Like, not in the sense, okay, here's what I mean. An honest, like, actual far leftist, if they're being honest, like, I'm talking a Bob Chipman, a movie Bob, even Vouch to an extent. Although I wouldn't consider them on the quote unquote, a lot of people wouldn't consider them a quote unquote left. They're radical liberals at the end of the day, especially Chipman. They would be honest with you and they would say, well, this is why higher education bars people with right leaning opinions. And this is what it is. We control the apparatuses of truth, and but this is like, I guess this person started off doing other things, but then moved to just like the lowest hanging, like Xander Hall, BreadTuber hanging fruit, like Hassan Abi shit, where it's like I'm gonna own Ben Shapiro and PragerU. Like, I thought I was gonna go into this video angry, but no, it's actually I'm actually finding this hilarious as we go on. So I'm going to try to give a more well-rounded critique, having also been a person, shockingly, who has spent some amount of time in academia, both at the undergrad and graduate level. I can give you, I would think, just as much, if not a more nuanced view of what reality on the ground is like. I think that I'm something, so I'm going to narrate if you can't listen from my speakers, because I don't use OBS or anything complicated, and maybe in the future. And please like, subscribe, share, click the bell if you are so kind to donate. There's my PayPal link. And also just like, promote my stuff, go to Break the Rules podcast, all that stuff. I'm trying to think of what I wanted to say, but I think as we go through this video, you'll find really quickly what I mean. This is like basic triumphalist liberal, like this is stuff that you would find on like Democratic Underground in like 2009, 2010, where they're like, well, this study shows that conservatives are dumber because they have a threat response. And it's literally that level of discourse. Conservatives are dumb. They have no new, well, we'll get to the no new ideas part. And this is why they don't go into higher education. They don't become professors. They don't become humanities majors. It's really spurious nonsense, but we'll get through it. So here he just explained how he went through a humanities program in these prestigious German university, or a skinny, not German, but you know, let's say Central European. And now he's going to say, did I encounter a single conservative? So,
So did I encounter any conservative?
Did he encounter a single conservative?
Any of the two universities? No.
Oh, I wonder why.
I had many political discussions with my fellow students, and honestly, I cannot recall people who were even right-leaning.
Very interesting.
And why is that? Let's take Heidelberg University as an example.
Yeah, let's take his university, Heidelberg.
High standards, and it's very difficult for a student to get enrolled there.
Very difficult, very high standards.
Community college. Only the best and the brightest can get in, and those who do generally possess traits such as rationality, open-mindedness, curiosity, and the readiness to change one's mind in the face of new evidence.
Oh my god! This is the biggest cope I've ever seen. This is literally, for those who don't know, I never talk about, unless people ask me, I never talk about my credentials because I think they're irrelevant. The way that the modern university system is, they're totally irrelevant. Because having witnessed people firsthand, both who have PhDs and who are in grad programs, let me tell you that having a degree is no mark of intelligence, okay? Let's get that off the bat. This is the biggest leftist rad lib cope I've ever seen in my life. Let's go through it. Okay. Now, before that, I have an MA, a master's degree in philosophy, and I have an MA in poli-sci, which is pretty much polytheory. And I went to university that had a very unique philosophy program in North America. One of the only ones that had both continental and Eastern philosophy. I started off in Eastern philosophy, then I moved to continental, but also the thing that threaded the two was aesthetic theory, aesthetic philosophy, philosophy of art. So then in politics, I was studying mostly the works of Michel Foucault because my grad supervisor was a big postmodernist. He came from UCLA and he came from other prestigious universities in America. But of course, the way the job market is, you go wherever you can go. So let's see. Rationality, open-mindedness, curiosity. Rationality, number one. Universities do not teach you, well, they claim to. And you can't use I had a different experience because I had good people I was working with. I was working in a niche. But on the average as a whole, especially at an undergraduate level, rationality is a huge cope. They don't teach you rationality. I mean, even when you go into, they'll teach you the mechanics of it. But in terms of internalizing this noble, Prussian school system, going into Anglo-American idea of what education is, the whole thing about rationality and free exploration of ideas, that's total and utter nonsense, and I hope people know that by now. And that's not simply because of the stultifying ideological qualifications to even go into a program. There is that, of course. The normie conservatives aren't totally wrong about that. But when it comes down to it, they're selecting for a specific phenotype, both intellectually and personality-wise. They're looking for someone who is, I guess you would say, a very nebbish, deferential functionary, like they do in the corporate world. So rationality is not the primary goal of higher education. It's not even the primary goal of being in academia itself. It is the ability to work in specific parameters. And when you do get to the PhD level, it's not that's the last of it. You have your research and everything, but it's not, it's like one of those pleasantries they tell to undergrads to make sure they keep coming back. Put it that way. Open-mindedness. Oh, that's not true at all. That is not true. Because there was this great line in this show called Billions. Even though Paul Giamatti, he's a cringe, Reddit fedora, he is a great actor, and he produced actually, I would say, one of the best shows to have ever come out in the last 10 years. It's called Lodge 49. Unfortunately, they canceled it out over only 2 seasons because, of course, the network, the same network that does The Walking Dead, what are they called? they have to, produce another season of Walking Dead. So they got to take funding from that. But he's in this show called Billions, and there was this one great line. And I know the show is like total like Reddit tier stuff, but there's this great line where his wife, who is like this, like a problem solver psychiatrist for corporations, she's like, why academia, why the arguments, why your legacy and your name and your reputation, quote unquote, is so important, because the actual arguments matter so little. The actual impact of what you're doing matters in terms of like the raw materiality of what you're doing matters quite little compared to other, captains of industry, which I don't believe fully. But the reason I am saying that is because academics, having experienced this firsthand, are petty, impish, groveling, backstabbers. Not all of them, but there's a lot of them. And like open-mindedness, I noticed, again, I had a good experience and I had a bad experience. I was lucky to be people who were sufficiently open-minded to let me do what I was doing. But when it comes to the whole, from the experiences of other people that I know who've went to other universities and so forth, open-mindedness is not there. That is, to even say that is kind of like, this dude is admitting he's just a wannabe functionary. It's kind of like theory cells on Twitter, the ones that are like, oh, well, I didn't get a teaching position at the New School or Goldsmith, so I'm going to like basically backstab everybody now. It's like that kind of petty, like pissant, groveling bugman mentality. A lot of academics possess that. And it's funny because even the comments, some of them are like shredding him, which is nice. But curiosity, again, no, that's not true. I mean, curiosity in terms of what you're doing in your hyper-specific niche, maybe. But in terms of the great books, none of them get produced anymore because from day one, it's just hammered out of you to be interdisciplinary. And that was why I never went beyond the master's. That is why I tried, but I wasn't serious about it because, of course, in order to get into a PhD program, you have to know people. That's the truth of it. Your ideas and your ability to express cutting edge theory is not the qualification. It's all just social striver, status seeking, deferential climbers who have a very specific personality that I don't possess. And I'm not coping right now. I'm just saying that's the way it is. And curiosity is the farthest thing from the qualifications because it's hammered into you from undergrad onwards that you only have a right to have an opinion on your hyper-specific niche. So that's not true. But of course, this guy is meaning like this garbled, half-butchered understanding of like Nietzschean perspectivalism of, well, you gotta question everything. Like, unironically, like what someone like Ben Shapiro would say, right? It's all crap, but readiness to change one's mind in the face of new evidence. Not even like social science or like hard science people do this nowadays. So that again is just cope. Because what is new evidence? Some like butchered study that you have like an incredibly small sample size that you've construed, kind of like those the left, like not even the leftist, but like the liberal, like normie live equivalent of like race and IQ, Charles Murray, Steve Saylor stuff is kind of like when you talk about brain chemistry and evolutionary psychology as it pertains to political attitudes. That is their cope by saying like, well, conservatives, they're not as open-minded, they're not as outgroup orientated. Therefore, they're not going to evolve quicker. Like, that's literally what some of them say. And even like the most hardcore, like social, the most hardcore, like post-structuralist, like BreadTube lefty wouldn't even stoop to such a level, because here's where this guy really hangs himself with his love and festooning for the academy. You'll see what I mean.
And right here we can start seeing the problem.
Oh yeah.
Do any of these values describe conservatism? Absolutely not. They are in fact antithetical to modern conservatism.
Wow.
So right off the bat, universities have a selection bias against conservatives.
They have a selection bias against personality types that conservatives happen not to possess. Because there's such a, like, see, this is the problem with even critique. This is why I feel dirty right now, because it's such a myopic, like, tiny video. It's such a short way of explaining away. And here's the thing, I don't even care about, like, oh, well, how come they don't let us in the academia? I don't care, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day. It matters in terms of the apparatuses of power and knowledge, which, again, I will talk about in this video. It matters in terms of what you can say and the discourse that is being set. But when you actually look at it, a lot of, like, the crazy, you know, quote unquote woke stuff, that came from places like Tumblr and elsewhere that happened to take some academic ideas. And then when it became social orthodoxy outside of the academy, then the academy just gave a rubber stamp to a lot of it. And like they're doing now with this other, I have to be careful what I say on YouTube, the face covering, that it could probably discipline children better and they can be more attuned to their bodies. Like, this is what the New York Times was saying in this op-ed, with based off a study that had no evidence, by the way. But even, like, people that throw the where's the studies for that, like the typical vouch tactic, it's really indicative of the bugman personality that you need in order to achieve a lot of status and success in a lot of different institutions. Now, the way you get in is there's so many different factors, from who you know, who you are. Let's face it, your socioeconomic status, because most people, even regardless of race, come from the same more or less upper middle class bourgeois background in order to make an academia. And that was another mark against me. I even had people that I knew, my supervisor in philosophy. There was this one friend I had who was in my grad program, craziest dude you've ever seen, this Polish bodybuilder. His name was Pat. If you're watching this, shout out to my friend Pat. He's the greatest dude ever. He is, like, literally a, like, high-minded hedonist. Like, he's just crazy. He's got all these stories. But he comes from, like, a working class. I come from working class background, but he comes from, like, a, like, real working class background in Hamilton. Not to dox him, but I remember talking to my supervisor, and he was mentioning to me that another prof said, well, he's a bit rough around the edges, you know, meaning that he comes from that particular class of, like, working class people, that his cadence and his way of talking and his way of explaining things hasn't been molded by the prerequisites of a bourgeois lifestyle, put it that way. So really, it's just, that whole point is moot. So there are so many different factors as to how people get into higher education to begin with. Just to, like, hand wave away, like, I mean, a lot of it's stupid, like the Ben Shapiro, Prager University arguments of, like, oh, well, you know, it's unfair. Like, who cares if it's unfair? Because you're dealing with a very Schmittian friend-enemy distinction, you know what I mean? Like, that's the cold, hard reality of it. These institutions were won over through a long march that took multiple decades. And of course they're going to conserve their power. But someone like this guy, Adam something, doesn't understand that. He actually believes in the liberal nonsense about, like, the John Dewey, we have to have functioning, like the John Dewey, Karl Popper, open society, we have to have functioning education systems in order to have a clean and pure Western democracy. It's like, it's such a cope. Like, this is the problem with academia in general. The functionaries in it refuse to acknowledge that they are functionaries, that they are just as equal to any PMC pro-managerial class type of thing. But no, they think that they're these higher Brahmins that are deserving of more respect and deference than some, like, corporate hack or some, like, NGO, like, on the ground person. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. Let's move on.
Mind, this is not deliberate. It's just a natural consequence of how the world works.
Oh, yes, it's a natural consequence of the world works, yes.
To get into academia as a conservative, holding your average conservative views.
Oh, what are those?
Anti-gay rights, anti-trans rights,
Based,
anti-immigration, anti-big government,
based,
anti-abortion, and anti-welfare. You will find.
Before we move on to what he's going to say here, which is particularly delicious, let me say that when you use the natural consequences argument to explain certain iniquities, that's kind of like similar to what conservatives say about other institutions, right? Is it not that academia is at the helm of manufacturing consent in hypermodernity? Is it not the fact that academia is literally the warehouse from which power knowledge gets manufactured? Now, for all of his talk about, I went to a sociology degree in one of the best universities in Northern Europe, it's like, well, did you skip the classes where you were talking about Michel Foucault and Giorgio Agamben, and to an extent, Debord and Roland Barthes, and like, did you skip that? Okay, because to explain away something in terms of, well, okay, it's essentialism, but I'm not going to do like the gotcha, basic James Lindsay stuff, but more deeper than that. Academia, as it is the helm of manufacturing power knowledge. It is literally the definition. It is the regime of truth. It is the production of various images of thought that behind our pretensions even structure what we think is just a natural consequence and outcome. How are these things good? How do we value these supposed rights? Right? Like what Deleuze said. Why is it that Plato structured the form of the good as the ultimate form that gives illumination to all other ones? Why is it good? What do we mean by how we think about certain things? That is the difference. And if he would have understood that, which I think he probably does, but of course, in order to give a snappy video, to own the chuds, own the Ben Shapiro people who are totally irrelevant, and the dissident right on the internet is, far, far beyond these normie, like Fox News conservative discourse. So then he's going into how these things are just settled and that's it. And if you don't agree, then I guess you're a chud that is ignorant, and you're not open-minded, bro. And let's hear what he says. If you can hear it.
That you will not be able to engage in any sort of meaningful discussions inside academia.
Wow.
Turns out academic discussion is a bit different from poll threads.
No, it's not. Actually, no, I materially it's not. Not defending Paul, but I'm saying, like, I've actually seen more open-mindedness on literally on Paul and 4chan than I have in some university classrooms. It's just the case. But let's see, what does he mean by the discourse is different in university?
And so suppose that as that stereotypical conservative.
Oh, wow. Oh, the guy that everyone accused of the Covington kid that like, even just thinking, like, he literally believes the narrative that even like normie leftists have moved on from because they know how stupid and ridiculous. But anyways, that's probably just like a smirk to and he's got a chide Enter Sandman. So anyways, but Nick Sandman, I Enter Sandman, you know what I mean. You know who I mean.
Enter this academic space where minority rights are being discussed. The topic of discussion being the socioeconomic circumstances of Roma people in Central Eastern Europe from the point of view of government policymaking from 1920 until 1989. Now, you entering this space and offering brilliant and incisive commentary such as brown people bad will most likely get you kicked out, perhaps not on the most polite terms either.
No, that's not true. I know of plenty of academics, a lot of them older actually. I mean, you could say white people bad, but that's, we'll get you funding. But I'll explain how this bit is like totally stupid. Wait a minute.
The reason for that is because contemporary popular conservative views have been desperately outpaced by modern academia. We know that gay rights don't...
Okay, before he goes on to just basically assumptions that lefties make that are ignorant of the fact that these things were decided largely without the public's consent. And when you actually go down to it, they are doing meaningful damage to civilization as a whole. But the reason that you don't believe that is because you, of course, you can't believe that because you can't have an honest discussion. Maybe because you've never seen anyone in university that has contradicted your opinion. But let's go back to what he said before about when he used Enter Sandman over here. Let's see, brown people bad. Okay, yeah, I'm sure. So before that, it was a very specific question about the socioeconomic circumstances of Rome. Okay, so here's the thing. You're taking a very specific question in terms of the historicity of a specific group in a specific time period, and you were a very impartial question that would be presented in any like European history or sociology course. And you're saying like conservatives are incapable of neutrally understanding and studying something in academia. You immediately equate everything to like the moral culture war crap that like you think you're immune from. That, oh, and conservatives will get kicked out for their opinions. Yeah, I wonder why conservatives will get kicked out for their opinions. Is it because those opinions are objectively evil, or is it because you've manufactured the apparatuses of power and knowledge to make people think that this is the contrary to consensus opinion? And you'll see later on in this video, he just appeals to consensus opinion. So it's not even worth me critiquing, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's so bad. It's so spurious. You're taking this, the socioeconomic circumstances of Roma people, the gypsies. Oh, I can't say that on YouTube. I'm sorry. I'll call them what my people call them, zingadas, as an Italian. Central European, Eastern Europe from the point of view of government policy making. Okay, that's an objective level social science question. That is a public policy course question. Now he's saying conservatives will immediately respond with their monkey lizard brain. Brown people are bad. Oh, wow. Maybe a conservative could do a study about how forced integration of certain communities, like the Roma, like, you know, the Zingada, that they have a detrimental effect to the host populace and to themselves also, and how that relates to how ethnic tensions relate to different things such as incarceration rates and so forth. Like, I mean, this is so stupid. This is, oh my God. It just gets worse from here, by the way. So let's go to when he talks about how all these things are settled and you are a bad and evil meanie for having naughty no thoughts. So, and I have to be careful what I say in YouTube, obviously.
Popular conservative views have been desperately outpaced by modern academia.
Well, I wonder why.
Gay rights don't lead to the collapse of the traditional family.
Oh, yeah.
Trans rights don't lead to the end of the two genders, and they...
That's literally what a lot of people in like post-human studies, and I think I can say queer theory, yeah. In queer theory, that's what they want. So they just cloak it in the terms of abolitionism. It's like, I know I shouldn't take a crazy person as an example of the whole, because it's certainly like not all lefties, not all people of the political left believe this, obviously, but you take someone like Sophie Lewis in her book, like Full Surrogacy Now, that's pretty much what they want. So, I don't know.
Mass sex change operation wave for gullible children.
In certain parts of Northern Europe, statistically, that's what's happening. In Sweden, for instance. So I don't know, like, well, without saying the word, but you know.
We know that immigration doesn't lead to the fall of Western civilization.
Oh, well, it's certainly going to in a number of ways because it's put pressure, again, this is just like normal, like right-wing talking points, but it's putting pressure on civilization in ways that we've never anticipated before, in ways that there are historic similarities, like, for example, in the later stages of the Roman Empire. But in terms of our own situation, especially in Europe, and now we're going to get a second wave of it with the Afghanistan fumbling. It's not that the West is destroying itself. It's not solely, like, usually if you've ever spent any time talking to someone who is even like a normie conservative, they would say that it's not just immigration, it's just that immigration in certain places accelerate the decline for various reasons because you have a low trust society that is made up of individuals that don't have any sort of common discourse or ability to empathize with each other in the way in which a people of a nation, because this is what a nation is. Nationalism I can critique as a modern invention. You know, I know people before it was like, oh, you bought in the Benedict Anderson meme, but it's certainly true that nationalism is just like the quick heuristic that people on the right have. But, you know, when you conceive of things the way in which empires or monarchical states conceive of themselves, nationalism is a modern invention. But that's besides the point. The point is, a nation is a people, and when you erode the very structures and the very stock of those people, there can be a space for pluralism, of course. There's always, especially North America, that's just a reality that you're going to have to deal with. And a sort of separatist pluralism is interesting, and certainly a lot of leftist movements have believed that. But what he's saying is just like, immigration's just a positive good, and that's it. Now, it may be a temporary economic good, again, by the metrics of like neoliberal globalization. Like, it's literally just like the far left jannying for the neoliberal global American empire, the GAE, if you know what I mean. Like, it's literally just jannying for the Washington consensus that people are cogs, that have people around the world. Like, we have the world citizen, like people are just cogs that can be moved around the globe, and they have no like comportment that is different from the people that the nations that they're immigrating to. They have no substantial difference in terms of their lineages and cultures and religions and so forth. And that, you know, they preach about, well, the Millennium Goals. It's like literally like late 90s, early 2000s, before like the towers fell, type of liberalism. That's what it is. They still believe that. So let's go on.
We know that big government doesn't lead to communism and George Orlando's 1964.
No, it leads to things that are worse, actually. But I think that big government, again, isn't inherently bad. That's like, this, like, he's got a picture of like Ben Shapiro and like Dennis Prager and Fox News in his head. And they don't like, these BreadTubers do not realize that the purview of right-wing thinking is different than what it was in like the Obama years, right? So anyways,
we know that women's rights to an abortion is a mostly beneficial thing.
How? Are you gonna pull out the Freakonomics thing? Like someone said in the comments, I can't find it, but if you accept that it's like buried deep. They said that if you accept that abortion is murder, then it's only logical and rational that you want to ban it, even if it has some fringe benefits. Like, certain other atrocities may have some fringe benefits, but would you pursue those? Right? Like, this is the problem with that Freakonomics thing about how we could just abort criminality out of existence. We could just, like, basically do a eugenics program towards the lower classes, which is kind of what's happening in America anyways. You know why I know, again, this is a normie conservative point, but you know why the black replacement rate in America, the African-American replacement rate, has stagnated and hovered around 13%? Well, without saying it, you know what I mean. So again, he's just saying this because it's the fashionable, like it's gospel among leftist groups, obviously.
We know that welfare programs work and that the bootstrap mentality doesn't.
No, they're both wrong. That's the problem. And a lot of even like conservatives are seeing this, but I'll explain. Let's see what he says.
For decades now, conservatives have been on the losing end of every single socioeconomic debate, including issues such as segregation.
Oh, wow. No, because the Dixiecrats, oh my God, that's comparing like wanting to outlaw abortion to segregate. Wow, that's the rest of the tail end of the video is just total nonsense. But let's go back to what he said about welfare. Sorry, is my Canadian coming out a boot? Right? I know I should play it up like Jeremy McClellan, like JJ McClellan. I should like play it up, but I know it's just, well, whatever. Okay, so they could both be wrong at the same time. The opinion that welfare doesn't work is an objective fact, but the opinion that you should like go by your bootstraps and have this like Ayn Rand like brutal capitalistic system like the Reaganite, like Ronnie Reagan, welfare queen stuff, they can both be wrong. Again, you start off this video predicated that the worth of a thinker in academia is predicated on curiosity and impartial evaluation of the evidence. But really, you're giving us an either or. And it's partially to blame with normie conservatives. That's the problem. But we just need smarter welfare programs. The problem is they can't work in a country like America. They can't work because there's so many different interests. It's not like these like small, tiny Northern European countries that have homogeneous populations that have managed to basically eradicate things like objective poverty and homelessness. I mean, there's too many socioeconomic problems in North America for that to happen. I think like welfare is down the line from things like the way in which the carceral state is reliant upon the drug trade, the way in which certain welfare programs are exploited by the few, therefore the many get tarred with them, the way in which mental illness, which is also exacerbated by the drug plague, the pharmacological regime of the pharmacological societies of control are producing addicts as a positive outcome for the system itself, because you have a decimated population where the original stock of a population is being decimated. Their livelihoods have been offshored. They're getting cheap fentanyl from that place in China that I can't mention on YouTube, which ironically, anyways, there's so many different issues that I do agree that conservatives really, really have destroyed their credibility with going down the trickle down, like a rising tide lifts all boats, you just need a job sort of nonsense. But to say that the welfare as it's structured in like most Western societies that are being proven to be objective hindrances, to say that, whoa, I guess they work and you conservatives are wrong, like that's just a poverty of thinking right there, which is ironic. So, but then this whole argument they make about the culture war and you've lost every battle, it's really ignoring. Like I shouldn't even go because that's what he's going to say. Let's just finish this off right now.
And women's rights to vote. And this actually ties back to
that a lot of women were against, actually, because they would mean they have the same responsibilities as a man. Not to say that's the point, but
Andrew Neil, UK arch conservative.
Again, like I said with my debate with Ayala girl, I don't believe in voting in general. I don't believe that. Well, anyway, I'm not going to go into it again.
But if during his famous interview with Ben Shapiro,
I'm interested that you think there's a thought movement inside the Republican America, all the new policies, the Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, the Green New Deal, they're all coming from the left, and they're popular.
Well, frankly, I'm confused.
Well, they're popular with certain segments of the population, and they're popular because Gibbs will always be popular. Anyways.
By the idea.
Conservatism has not brought a single new idea to the table since decades.
Wow. Oh my God. Wow. Oh my... I can't... This is where I stop to take this seriously because we're in La La Land now. There's been, like... What new ideas can you point to? Oh, the cutting edge of posthumanism. The cutting edge of, like, Urbanomic and Varso Sal books. Like... You know where posthumanism came from? It came from Pico della Mirandola. Like, that's... If you read his one essay... These ideas are old as time itself, okay? Like, that's besides the point. The right wing, up until very recently, has always been on the cutting edge of certain intellectual and aesthetic, artistic ideas, certain philosophic truths. It's just that what we think of as the conservative is very, like, stultifying. It's like American Fox News stuff. That's what he's thinking of. He's thinking of Ben Shapiro. I mean, basically every trend of academic, like almost every trend of continental philosophy that deals with things like technology within the past, like almost 20 years, came from someone who is pretty damn right wing, who actually posts like a boomer. You know who I'm talking about. I'm referring to Nick Land, of course, in the CCRU. That, like, what about that? What about accelerationism? Like, where did that come from? Like, as much as I critique and think like he's wrong about a lot of things, you have to admire that Moldbug really, did jumpstart new ways of thinking at least. Even outside of that, like every new idea that is critiquing our current situation, maybe it's just my own bias, but they tend to be coming from the political right. And that clip about what about the Green New Deal? What about Medicare for all? What about like these ideas are how long has the left talked about Medicare for all? Like since the Ronald Reagan days? Like since the Bush years at least? What does that clip prove? But well, oh my god. What about modern, like even modern art? I mean, Julius Evola was like the best kept secret that European art history academia had to like bury his influence upon things like Dadaism, right? So anyways.
Modern conservatism has become this amorphous protest movement against the left's imagined hypocrisy, a movement that is driven at this point by nothing else but fear. Well,
I gotta agree with him there. It is a amorphous, ineffective protest movement run by certain think tanks that have certain similar sets of ideas. But I think you have to distinguish between conservatism, TM, quote unquote, and what the modern dissident right is. But whatever, he just like lumps in everybody, I guess. So who knows?
Blind, uncritical celebration of some imaginary glorious past.
Oh, here comes the fascism argument by Umberto Eco. It's all, see, the only things that you have to read to understand the modern like BreadTube left. Number one, Fascism by Umberto Eco. Number two was that one book by Wilhelm Reich, The Authoritarian Personality. Was that no, that was the Adorno one, but the one by Wilhelm Reich, I think it was The Authoritarian Personality. Those are the only two you need, really. That's it. Not even like Das Kapital or Marx or anything. These people are not real Marxists, but anyways.
It has become intellectually empty, bankrupt. What major cultural reason?
Yeah, I'm sure that the regimes of truth in academia spitting out papers that say the same thing over and over again. Yeah, I'm sure they're really on the cutting edge of new and brilliant ideas. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure like the fact that even mainstream people read, like literally read stuff by shit posters like Bronze Age Pervert. Yeah, I'm really sure that there's a glut of like new leftist ideas out there. Wow.
Can we debate on an academic level if they have been proven wrong? And don't get me wrong, nothing is truly settled science, but the
cope
shift eventually as new evidence becomes available.
No, things usually never shift that way, because again, just as Ben Shapiro and all of like the cringy like anti-SJW people of yesteryear, they make the same assumption. Now BreadTube is making that same assumption that things like science and social science, that they're these pure priestly Brahmin caste examiners and preachers of truth that will change as new evidence comes. Things rarely change when quote unquote new evidence comes. And if the last 2 years is what's happening in the world, if that hasn't shown you that, then I don't know what to say to you. That's on you. You know what I mean?
Academics might have discussions about race relations and might do studies about race relations, but no one's talking about the inferior skull shape of the Negroid race anymore. You know, academia didn't forcibly excise conservatives from its ranks.
Yeah, they kind of did, actually. I love how he like goes to phrenology too. That's such a like typical like talking point. Maybe this guy's being paid off by some NGO? Who knows? Nah, probably not. I don't know.
It's just that conservatives have dug their heels in and they got left behind.
Wow. Yeah, got left behind by the manufacturers of the regime of truth. Yeah, I agree. They got left behind. They should have been more forceful. They should have, that's another video entirely lamenting on the failures of conservatism when it comes to academia. But you know,
and I'm not saying it's impossible to be a conservative and an academic.
Here's the cherry on top.
Do exist, but they're like an evolutionary biologist who's also a young Earth creationist.
Oh my God! Yeah. Okay. This guy, he probably was like oh my God. People doubted me when I said on Twitter that both the anti-SJWs and BreadTube came from the same template of the new atheists. It's just like some of them went one way, some of them went the other. Most of them went the other way. Like TJ Kirky's pretty much had to grovel to BreadTube, my old enemy. It's so funny. Like, it must be impossible. Yeah, I'm sure it was impossible. I'm sure it's impossible for conservatives to, you know, people on the right to be artists. Like, it certainly is impossible, I think, to try to ingratiate yourself in positions of power. But it's not just because, oh, your ideas are bad and you're an evil, naughty, no-no person. Therefore, you're not going to get ahead in academia. Like, it's the answer to that question is so much more complex. This is the problem I have with people like James Lindsay and people, of course, people like Ben Shapiro, who again is another sellout and another gatekeeper. And I think like it behooves me that he has any support by anybody at this point. Ben Shapiro is just the Lincoln Project, put it that way. But their failure is they didn't want to recognize the real enemy, which is the business capitalist model of education, that it's the selection bias. It's not that people are getting censored outright. I mean, that is true. There are people who do get censored outright. There have been people, I mean, as much as like people think he's crazy or whatnot, you know, like Giorgiani, they wanted to take his PhD away, right? Just for people he associated with, who he later now deeply renounces. By the way, and Break the Rules, at the end of the month, we're going to have Jason Reza Giorgiani on. So anyways, I just think it's hilarious how the real problem was that they never, conservatives themselves, never contended with the real issue, which is there is a selection bias. They don't have to outright censor you. They just have to select for a certain type of person, a certain type of personality that just so happens to be acclimated towards certain political opinions. It's more nuanced than like, oh, they're censoring us. Like, that's the problem. But what he's saying is total nonsense.
I mean, it's certainly possible, and people like this do exist, but you have to do some pretty hardcore mental gymnastics, and you have to really compartmentalize your beliefs.
This is really just stupid arrogance in like, it's really just ignorant of how things actually work, which I'm shocked. Well, I'm actually not shocked, but you have to really compartmentalize your beliefs, you know, like implying that people on the left don't have to do this as well, or don't have to lie to people. It's do like some weird, like complex Mott Bailey stuff. It's just like, it's so disingenuous. Why am I even bothering?
Meaningful academic work. Otherwise, if you really were true to your core beliefs, all your research papers would just read, God done did it. And that's a big reason.
Okay, so theology used to be the mother of all sciences. You know that, right? It used to be ahead of philosophy. It used to be that it was the supreme king of the scholastic university. Oh, sorry, my cat is crawling along over me. Oh God. Oh, you know, my cat, you know, calls up my legs like they're tree trunks. So it's just so ridiculous that, oh, God did it. Like, yeah, I'm sure even like the way that the new atheists critiqued the creationists, not that I'm saying like I'm a young earth creationist, but like, just, it's so ridiculous the way that they went about it. The way that they critiqued that line of thinking as, you just think that it's the God of the gaps. Like, this is like literal baby brain Richard Dawkins stuff, you know?
There aren't too many creationist biologists, or for that matter, conservative academics. And that's the reason why academia is so left.
Oh, yeah.
There is no conspiracy, there is no censorship, there is no ill intention. It's just that...
Only when we do point out the ill intention, only when we do point out the concerted efforts of censorship. Yeah, I'm sure that it's just like, that's just the way it is. But even beyond like the surface level, there's censorship and there's like selection bias. The deeper reality is that they've managed to manufacture our parameters of what we even know to be a truth claim to begin with. This is like basic, you know, critical theory like Foucault, Octavia Butler, who else am I thinking of? Like, this is like, even when it comes to other colleges, this is basically like Edward Said. Like, this is so, for someone who has a degree in sociology, I'm actually shocked, to tell you the truth. But not really, but you know.
Understand how the world works, how society works, and you know enough about history, it suddenly becomes really difficult to be a conservative.
Oh, it's so difficult. It's so difficult.
These are my ideas.
Yeah, it's so difficult to be a conservative in an environment that is gamed against you from the start. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, even just like denoting supreme value upon academia and what current academics are doing is itself another con game. Because, and it took me years to realize this, because I was of the opinion that conservatives were unduly harsh upon the academy. But now I realize that a lot of it is just a scam, and a lot of it is getting nowhere. And these people don't actually, like, whatever this guy says, these people don't have any sort of cutting edge original idea. And the cutting edge original ideas of yesteryear have been marginalized. Because there was this great essay I read once about the what they call the zombie books. The zombie books are in academia. They're the great like interdisciplinary tomes, kind of like Discipline and Punishment, kind of like The Second Sex, kind of like The Genealogy of Morals, kind of like even like 1,000 Plateaus. Well, that's like the definition of an interdisciplinary book. But the reason that they're no longer written anymore is because academia has shown them, academics themselves have layered on their students a ingrained mistrust of interdisciplinary texts, because they're like, oh, well, they're not being honorable to the literature in my hyper-specific field. And so they call them zombie books because they sort of hang in the specter, like in the new sphere of academia and academic discourse. Let me actually look up this essay, zombie books. Okay, let's see. Sorry, Hildy. My cat is on me. Zombie books. So I know I'm gonna get like 1 million hits. I pretty much, I'm not gonna find the essay, but they're basically books that academia has quote unquote moved on from. But they are books that still have relevance because they are so breathtaking and interdisciplinary that they created the foundations of a body of knowledge. So they're books kind of like The Birth of Biopolitics. They're books kind of like The Second Sex that have created like a lot of like feminist literature. Who else am I thinking of? Even just like postmodernism, The Logic of Late Capitalism is one of them. I'm Living Death in Higher Education. Yeah, I'm not gonna find it, but if I do find it, I'll link it. But it's just like they are books that academics like to tell their students are irrelevant because they're not hyper niche and specific. So where am I getting with this? The point being is that the new ideas can't grow because the structure of academia itself selects out of interdisciplinary thinking from the students, from graduates, even professors, etc. So I just wanted to give a critique off the top of my head of this terrible video when it came out a few months ago. Like, I feel so bad for doing it. I always thought that like I could do the reaction channel thing, like the anti-SJW thing better, but I kind of feel dirty. I kind of feel like I have to go take a shower. So this has been another video. Like I said, like, share, subscribe. I just debunked Adam something. Oh boy. As always, God bless and goodbye.